Save big money at Menards. Add comfort to your life with Menards' great selection of Serta mattresses. Find the perfect mattress that fits your size and firmness needs. Hurry in today and pick up a Serta Gel memory foam mattress in a box, on sale now through May 27th. Take control of your comfort with Serta mattresses at Menards. And check out our weekly flyer on menards.com for all the great deals happening now.
Save big money at Menards.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What kind of crazy gun was that?
It will take more than the speed of Hermes to stop an Amazon fiend.
Who are you?
So they've got one of their own.
Wait, what?
Wonder Woman, what's the plan?
Regroup with the others, tell Carter to take care of the planes. We need to buy more time. Did President Roosevelt send you?
President Roosevelt? What? What's happening?
Keep an eye on whatever this is.
I got him, boss.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and it is a DC Animation episode, so that means I am joined by the regular DC Animation correspondent, Stacy Dooks. Stacy, how you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing well. It's great to be back, and it's great to be talking about another really fun DC cartoon. So I can't wait.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I am too. I'm looking forward to this. This one had kind of flown under my radar. We're going to be talking about the Justice Society World War II animated film. Kind of flew under my radar when it came out, just because I've never been traditionally a big Justice Society fan, and we'll talk about that as well. But when you suggested doing it, I'm like, all right, yeah, let's check this thing out, see what it's like. But before we get too much into that, it's, as we were talking about off mic before we started up here, it's been a minute since you've been on the show. So why don't you take a minute and remind everybody about who you are and what you do?
Oh, hi. Well, I'm Stacy, professional, semi-professional podcaster by day. And I also do a little bit of writing. It's kind of fallen by the wayside of late, but I'm slowly getting back on the horse. I've got some new ideas that I'm working on. And I do a weekly podcast with my brother Ryan called the Fanboy Power Hour, in which we discuss all manner of nerdity. Our latest episode is out, where we journeyed up to Edmonton, Alberta, and took in the Top Talent Wrestling promotion, which featured a lot of fun indie talent from around the provinces, as well as some guests like Penta. So if you're like a fan of Lucha Libre and also some of the AEW stuff, he's a regular there. So it was fun to see him come to Calgary and play in this indie show. We were in a converted music hall, and we had a chance to we watched the whole thing. We stood for about, 5.5 hours for it, because it was standing room only. But man, my 48-year-old niece did not appreciate that, but the show was so good that I didn't mind hobbling back to the car afterwards. So it was really fun. And it's an episode that I'm particularly proud of, because we just completely fall into our love of like indie wrestling. So if you want to check that out, feel free. You can find Fanboy Power Hour wherever you get your podcasts, much like this fine one. And yeah, I've been doing well since then. You know, the last time we were chatting, it was Return of the Caped Crusaders, which, you know, it was the very much kind of the Silver Age episode. So it seems only fitting that we go a little further back and we go back to comics Golden Age, where they do what they do best: punch Nazis in the freaking face, which is you know, always so satisfying. But yeah, I'm glad to be back.
Yes,
Love it.
you know, punching Nazis in the face, always heartily endorsed on this show.
Absolutely.
As you know, the great Aldo Rain said, Nazi ain't got no humanity. So we everyone is free to punch them in the face, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, so great. Punch them, just flang them around. They are the ultimate guilt-free, you know, guilt-free bad guy that you can just dispose of without a doubt. Nobody ever, well, in the current political climate, some people are like, well, they have certain points of view that are really great. I'm like, the point of view that I want is them going into a jet turbine. That's the point of view that I want to have. You treat them like Looney Tunes villains. You just fucking destroy them in every creative way you can think of. Like, there's a couple minutes in this movie where my writer sense was tingling. Like, we'll get to it in due course, of course. But when the team comes across the Nazi castle, I was like, oh shit, there are so many ways we could blow this fucker up. I was starting, my fingers were starting to twitch. I'm like, get me a keyboard.
Yeah. Okay. Now, before we dive too much into the movie, you know, one of the things we like to do on the show is talk about, you know, what kind of stuff you're in lately. I know you mentioned the indie wrestling stuff for your podcast, but is there anything else that's kind of been catching your interest these days?
Oh, well, I have been slowly catching up on a couple of like my to read pile is gigantic, of course. So like a lot of modern fans, you know, I purchase a lot of collections, a lot of archival editions. And recently, you know, I've got a couple in the pipeline. I'm reading right now. I'm reading the original by the original author epic of Miracle Man. So you know, yeah. So I've been reading that new edition that just came out because I want to build up to getting to Neil Gaiman's take with the Silver Age.
Right.
So I started off with the original, and I remember back in the day, I had picked up a couple of the early issues in reprint. And so I'd read a little bit of it, but unfortunately, you know, I never read it in its entirety. And I remember being fascinated by the concept of a Captain Marvel Shazam type who had grown to middle age, forgotten his magic word, and then suddenly gets it back. And suddenly discovers that there's this whole hidden world that he had completely forgotten about. So that was a fascinating concept. So now I'm rereading the early issues, and it's very interesting to revisit this particular era because we all know Alan Moore from Watchmen, obviously. We know him from the ABC stuff, you know, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But this is very early Alan Moore where he's just starting to kind of become the Alan Moore that we know with the deconstruction. So it's very interesting to see that early stuff kind of collected and kind of given a fresh coat of paint. I'm very aware that this is going to be a dark ride because, you know, eventually we do get to that one issue that is not going to be particularly fun. But so far it's interesting. I mean, but I'll withhold judgment, but I'm very interested in that. And I got queued up in the chamber the first omnibus compendium of Sandman Mystery Theater, you know, Matt Wagner.
Oh, yes.
Stephen T. Siegel and Guy Davis just doing the Lord's work. Now, you talk about the Sandman Netflix series that we have now. And don't get me wrong, that is absolutely wonderful. I love it to death. Yeah. But if they had one shot of like Wesley Dodds in that fucking gas mask, I would have made a sound that I think only dogs could hear. Because, like, don't get me wrong, like back in the day, I had respect for Sandman, but I was just like, I can't quite make that jump because I was like, the early stuff with the superheroes was kind of interesting, but then they kind of went off on their own thing, and I was like, I have waited too long. I have missed my moment. But when Sandman Mystery Theater came out, I'm a huge like Golden Age fan, as we'll discuss later when we get into the meat and potatoes. So the idea of like taking the Sandman character and exploring, the kind of like the pulp sensibility while still setting it ostensibly in comics golden age, but cranking up the realism was very interesting to me. And that series is ready to become a Netflix show because there's such a cool dynamic between Wesley and Diane, where Wesley is very skilled and he has the prophetic dreams that keep pushing him, the dreams from Morpheus that push him to try to like go out there and see justice done. But Diane is the detective. Like she's the sleuth. Like the thing about Diane is that she's not just the damsel in distress. She has active agency and is super smart. In fact, when they revisit the characters later on down the road in James Robinson's Starman, Jack Knight is more stoked to meet Diane Belmont because she's like a mystery novelist that he's really, really fond of. So it's a really fun, like, and their relationship is just great. They're totally supportive of each other. They're like the Nick and Nora Charles of like the Golden Age superhero set. And then gradually as the series goes on, a lot of those Golden Age characters start bleeding in around the edges. Like there's the Phantom of the Fair arc where we meet the Crimson Avenger. There's a Starman bit. Blackhawk shows up at one point, and it's just like, oh shit, all that's great. And when they would do the flashback times past sequences that would feature Wesley, they would bring in Guy Davis and he would illustrate them in that style, which was really cool. So yeah, I've got that one ready to go, and it's great. And if you don't necessarily even have to be huge on superheroes, everybody. If you just like a good mystery kind of crime series that happens to feature a dude in a mask who like gasses people and knocks them out, that's really great. And yeah, the recent relaunch with Riley Rossimo, I read the first issue of that and found it really cool. I liked the.
I didn't even know they're.
Yeah,
they're doing a relaunch of it. Wow.
They did it. They did it like in time for the new JSA series that Johns has been writing. They've done a couple spin-off books of like Green Lantern and The Flash, featuring The Flash and his daughter. So The Flash will feature heavily here. So that'll be interesting. And then there's also the Sandman one, which is kind of like a semi sort of sequel. The events of Sandman Mystery Theater could have happened off stage. We don't know. But there's a very interesting wrinkle in that Wesley develops the gas, the knockout gas, to ostensibly be a pacifist weapon to help stop conflict. And this one general is just like, buddy, if we use this, how are we going to be like, how's it practical? Like war is about killing people. And like you see Wesley's face and he's just like, oh shit. Like, oh yeah, military industrial complex. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a really good series. I've only gotten to read the first issue, but very strong debut. So yeah, that's all the stuff that I'm into right now. So how about you, man? Like what have you been reading lately?
Well, I wanted to comment on what you had just said too, because I mean I've only read a little bit of Sandman Mysteries Theater. I've got the there are these two trades that DC had out, which apparently is not the whole collection, and I guess they just forgot about that line of trades that they were doing at one point.
They got into like 7 or 8 or 9 volumes, and then
I mean the ones that were available digitally. They only had 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so now they've released the omnibus, you said. So like now I'm like, okay, so I gotta buy those 2 trades again. Basically, that's what it looks like.
I mean, basically, it's a hefty tome. It collects, I think, the first 30 or 40 issues of the series. So it's really good. It's got a couple of great storylines. The initial storyline, the tarantula, is really, really good. Very, very, very creepy too. So
so I just read that first book, and yeah, oh my god, it was great. Like and this is talking from somebody who is not a fan of the Golden Age. Like I was saying, I've never really got into the Justice Society. So all I knew about Sandman was from what I'd seen in other stuff, and from his minor appearance in the Gaiman Sandman. So that was it. Like that was the extent of my Sandman knowledge. So I went in completely cold, and yeah, it's really cool how they did that. And I think we'll probably be talking about this when we get into the Superman side of things here, but people are talking about him entering the public domain in another 10 years, and we were just talking off mic, and I'm just like, man, there's so much stuff I want to do, and there's so much stuff you can do when you put that character in the realistic setting as opposed to the much more fantastical setting that the comics did. And I think, and Sandman Mystery Theater proves that perfectly. I mean, it is, even if you don't know about, superheroes, that is something that you can easily get into. And also, like you said, as soon as you started talking about Sandman Mystery Theater, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, man, they should really do a TV show about that. So you were speaking my mind.
Yeah, definitely. And there's that one great crossover comic called Sandman Midnight Theater, where, Wesley actually meets Morpheus for like a brief
Oh,
moment. He
nice.
discovers Morpheus's prison, and Morpheus is like, "Oh, I know you. There's a little bit of me in you. Can't be easy for you. Now forget." And Wesley walks out of the room like, "What was that?" Yeah, it's a great little acknowledgement of it. And yeah, it would make for a really good Netflix series, like a very kind of like Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries kind of vibe, like, but with a little more gothic ambiance, a lot more like maybe even bring in like some, and I can't believe I'm using this, like some Dick Tracy-ian elements, like make it look kind of like not quite reality, but yeah, that would be really cool. But it would be a tough road to hoe to bring Guy Davis's visual sensibility to a screen, because man, that guy is one of a kind. He's got the chops. So yeah, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Love that guy.
Yeah. But as for me, like, I have just started reading the Jeff Johns JSA run from the what was it, the late 90s? I think that started in early 2000s, something like that.
1990s. I remember when James Robinson helped kind of bring the ship. He kind of launched in the first couple of issues. He was a co-writer, and then
that's right. Like I noticed, it's funny. Yeah. It's called the Jeff Johns collection, but it starts off with stuff written by James Robinson and David Goyer.
Yeah. Well, Robinson and Johns and Goyer, I think were kind of like not necessarily acolytes of Robinson, but they kind of like, because I remember Goyer did a lot of like writing as well on Starman near the tail end, like when the Grand Guignol arc opened up, and when Culp made his attack on Opal City. And we kind of got the full story behind Culp and his relationship with Dickie Swift, aka the Shade, and how all that went down. And it was Goyer was very much a part of that. And I think Johns he didn't really write for that, but I think Johns kind of like he was doing some other stuff. And then I think when he came on to JSA, that was his like one, I think not necessarily his biggest break, but definitely one of. So
that's when I first started hearing his name.
Yeah, he cut his teeth on that, and he kind of like he did something that I thought and my brother thought was nigh on impossible, in that he took on Hawkman. And look, like real talk, Hawkman ain't ever gonna make any kind of fucking sense. Like that poor character has been jacked so many times by continuity, but he managed to kind of like boil it down to the essentials, and kind of make it make a bit more sense. So, and when he did his Hawkman run, that was really good too. And and he gave it his all, and he did make the JSA kind of a going concern for a little while there, because in the modern day, in the cold light of day, I have to, as I get older, I have to admit to myself, like real talk, the JSA ain't ever getting over. Like they're not gonna go over. Like they're good for short sprints. They're good for like every once in a while, but as we move forward, it's kind of like the Captain America problem, right? Like the further you keep moving ahead in time, the farther back World War II is, and the longer Steve's sleep before he comes back to life is. So it's like we are at the point now that when I was a kid reading like All-Star Squadron in the 1980s, the war was like 40 years ago. And and Sherlock Holmes, which I was also reading, I was cutting my teeth on the Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories, was like a century ago. Now we're creeping up on the part where like World War II is almost where Sherlock Holmes was back when I was reading.
Right.
So like it's 100 years ago. Like it's hard to get the kids excited about, Al Pratt, the Golden Age Atom, and look, it breaks my heart as a Ted Grant, Wildcat fan.
Ted Grant, yeah.
To be like, this guy's so cool. Like he punches evil in the face, and he's got 9 lives that he was given by Bast. Like, what is not to love about this guy? Like, I think it's me and Doc Shaner, the 2 guys holding it down for Ted Grant. Like it breaks my heart, because there's some really fun characters in here, and unfortunately, it's hard to keep them kind of relevant with the times when, the 1940s was so very long ago. But they are,
Yeah, because I mean,
yeah.
some of those characters they only work in that context. Like it's hard for
Hmm.
like for Jay Garrick. Like, how are you going to get excited about Jay Garrick when you got Barry Allen and
Hmm.
Wally West and all the other guys around
Oh,
instead?
but Jay is great.
Um,
He's everybody's grandpa, and it's
well,
wonderful.
I mean, that's why
But
he works. I think that's why he works now. I think that's why he works so
mhm.
well in the Flash TV show. Plus, it helped that he had John
Oh
Wesley
yeah.
Shipp playing him too.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but you know what I was thinking too is, um, I think Captain America is like the only one you can get away with this because I think
Kind
actually
of,
the
yeah.
further you get from World War II, the
Hmm.
more sense Captain America, the more Cap works as a character because that whole man on a time thing works so much better when more time has passed. Like when it's only been, you know,
Yeah.
was it like 20 years back when he first came out of the
Hmm.
ice in the 60s? It's like, well, that's not really that long of a time. It's not that
Hmm. Yeah,
the world has not changed that much, Steve. You can calm down a little bit. But when you
that's
take
true.
him when 90 years or 100 years has passed, then it starts getting me like, oh wow, now that works a little bit more. That strikes a different tone now.
Yeah, it has some very Arthurian return from Avalon and
Hmm.
England's greatest need kind of vibe to it, which is
Right.
which is cool now that I put my head on it. But it's just as much love as, and look, I treasure like encountering the JSA when I was a kid, through the pages of All Star Squadron by the God Roy Thomas and the deity Jerry Ordway, where just it was a perfect book at a perfect time that just introduced me to all this crazy stuff that I
Hmm.
had no idea existed. And look, I'm not going to call Marv Wolfman or Paul Levitt's liars. I'm not going to call them out. I'm not going to put them on blast. But as one of those kids growing up in the 80s, pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, I was never confused by there being multiple Earths. I was never confused because there's always that little blurb like there's another Earth and it's called Earth 2 and
Hmm.
here's where the heroes are. And that was like, and look, I appreciate that they had to do the clearinghouse, but I'm just like, come on now. Come on.
Yeah, I think there's and I see this all the time. I've talked about this before. I see that a lot with the like Warner Brothers and how they're
Oh
always
yeah.
like, well, when Smallville was on the air and they really wanted to do a Batman episode, and they're like, well, we can't have Bruce Wayne appear in Smallville because then people will be confused when they see Bruce Wayne in the movie. So I'm like, no, they won't. And then now
Oh.
we've got like and it and even now after right now we've got
Mhm.
we got Superman on TV, we got Superman in the movies,
Mhm.
and there's still this kind of thinking that persists that, well, are people going to get confused? I'm like, no, people are not that stupid.
Yes, as much as I love, I respect, I love a strong word. I respect Dan DiDio for many things, but that whole bit where he was anti Elseworlds for the longest time because people would get confused by the notion of a quote unquote real Batman. Dan, lean in close. There is no real Batman. I'm not trying to break your heart, my guy, but he's not real. It's just like
I mean,
we can do whatever we want. Yeah.
it reminds me of that Grant Morrison quote, right? When he says like,
Mm.
when, kids understand these things, they can,
Hmm.
reconcile these things in their head, but adults get these stupid fucking ideas in their head about like who blows the tire, who fills up the air in the Batmobile's tires and all
Yes,
that kind of shit.
absolutely. Like everything's got to fit into an Excel spreadsheet. Like people like
Hmm.
this is the cinema sinsification of media. And it
Yeah.
drives me bananas. I think the one that made me almost throw furniture was the one where they were doing a thing on Blade Runner and they were like, everything looks so run down and broken in the supposedly future. I'm like, this is cyberpunk. Like it's supposed to look broken. Like, oh my God. Like I needed to like disconnect from the computer and do some deep breathing for like 10 minutes. Because I was like, I'm going to just go in the comments section and burn myself to the ground. So
I think
yeah.
Derek and I talked about this at some point. It was probably when we did our episode on Crisis on Infinite Earths, the
Mm.
CW crossover. But and it's so funny in trying to make the DC continuity make sense. They only end up making it more
Yeah, making it
confusing. It was
worse.
back when it was all these different Earths. It actually made more sense than it makes now.
Right? Like
I
everything
mean,
is imaginary. They've tried to put it away, then they realized, "Oh man, we threw out a lot of really cool things like Supergirl and the Phantom
mhm.
Zone and Superboy and the Legion and Superboy and the Legion and Superboy and the Legion," which completely just wrecked the poor Legion of Superheroes book, and it never recovered. Like you just have to accept that this whole thing is imaginary and there are
Mhm.
no limits. But unfortunately, as much as I love the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, as much as I love DC Comics Who's Who, I love setting crunch. Guys, we're going to get to the movie in a couple minutes. Don't even worry about it. But but as much as I love that delicious setting crunch, I love stuff like, ooh, it's ruby quartz, or oh, it's an adamantium shield, or like
Mhm.
Spider-Man created his web shooters and here's some schematics of them. Like ultimately it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Like as J. Michael Straczynski once wrote, Star Furies fly at the speed of plot. Like there's nothing to worry about, baby. It's all made up. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in this day and age, we a lot of people are looking to get the gotcha moment of like, oh, I don't, that doesn't make sense. How did Indiana Jones survive like getting to the island when he was like clinging to the periscope? I'm like, it's because he's Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
That's why. Like, if he doesn't, there's no plot. If he drowned on the way, it'd be a pretty short movie, wouldn't it?
Did you ever watch
Like,
Supernatural?
I did a little bit. I watched the first season, and then unfortunately, I
Okay.
kind of fell off, and it was another like, I've waited too long. It was another Sandman.
Yeah. I mean, it's 15 seasons long, and it's
Yeah,
and
that's
they
a
and they kept it going. They kept it
oh
going for.
man, they kept it
But I
running.
will say, to their credit, like I actually enjoyed it for most of those 15 seasons.
Okay,
It had its drop offs here and there, but
peaks
the
and valleys.
chemistry
Yeah.
of the chemistry of the leads alone made it worth watching all throughout, and it helped that they were like brothers in real life, so that
Mhm.
really helped that chemistry really came through, and it made it entertaining even when they hit those valleys. But there's this one time when they had so in the last season they're going after God, right? And so it's like the
Okay,
it's like
all
the way
right.
it's like maybe that's another reason I like it. It's like a JRPG, live action JRPG, right? They start off, driving around these back roads,
Mhm.
hunting monsters and whatnot, and then in the end, you have to kill gods. So
Defeating,
there is that.
killing rats in the kitchen to going to take
Yeah,
on God. Okie doke.
yeah.
All right, I get it.
So,
Oh man.
and then God decides to strike back at them by removing their plot armor. Literally, he removes their plot armor. Because it's like the whole idea is like, this is, you've been the heroes of this story, and that's why you've been able to get away with so much stuff. And then all of a sudden, everything in the episode becomes so much harder for them to deal with. It's hilarious.
That actually sounds fascinating. That's like when Jack Slater ends up in the real world in Last Action Hero. And yes,
Yeah,
everybody, I just referenced Last Action Hero. Come at me.
which
But
is
yeah,
an
amazing.
underrated movie.
Underrated, like so fun, and that soundtrack is a banger. I will
Yeah,
stack it up
yeah.
against most any other movie soundtracks of the '90s. So
Mhm.
again, come at me.
Um, But anyway, JSA, Just Society,
Yes.
World War II.
Hmm.
So this is one of the Tomorrowverse movies. This is
Hmm.
apparently it's the second installment. It takes place after Man of Tomorrow, um,
Yes.
which is another one I gotta go back and rewatch, and
I
because
think I
they
might have to pull the trigger too. Yeah.
might have, yeah, because when I watched it the first time, I'm like, oh, it's okay. I didn't really think too much
Hmm.
of it, but I think I was kind of like half in, half out. I think I was busy with other stuff, had other
Hmm.
stuff in my
Hmm.
mind, because frequent guest Anthony Desiato, he had done an episode of Digging for Kryptonite recently where he had the one of the writers of that movie on, and they were talking about it. I'm just like,
Ooh.
man, this actually sounds pretty damn awesome. I got to go back and rewatch that movie.
Yeah, yeah. Again, like when I first watched this one, I was very kind of taken with it, and I meant to pick up like Long Halloween and then Superman, Man of Tomorrow. I was very interested, but I was like, well, it's an origin joint, and I just
Mhm.
like look. I'm just gonna be 100% real with everyone here. As Batman fans are sick of the pearls, if I've got to watch that goddamn rocket leave the exploding planet one more fucking time, I'm just going to start engaging in primal scream therapy. Because look, guys, we get it. We get it. Like Grant Morrison boiled it down to the essentials, like doomed planet, desperate scientist, last hope kind of couple. Let's go. Like, just, I get it. Unless somebody's been living in a cave somewhere, everybody knows how Superman got to be Superman. And I'm tired of all the navel gazing at like, oh, this is his origin. This is where he gets his power. I get it. I've seen like upteen gazillion movies depicting that, on comics depicting that, like Superman Birthright, the champagne, like Mark Waid, the general, creating that awesome story where like I still sometimes go back and look at that sequence where Superman goes into the gun owner shop and just fucking loads the gun and fires the gun and then catches the bullet at the last second. Like, that little girl had to live with that, and now you do too. And I'm like, that is the coldest shit in the game. Batman can take as many dudes up on the top of a high building as he wants, but that shit where Superman fired a gun in that dude's face is metal as hell. Like, oh, and that Leno U art, forget about it. But yeah,
oh god, yeah.
It's just Superman's origin has been done to me. But having watched this again and kind of being like, yeah, man, Darren Criss is a really good Superman. Like, I quite like his portrayal. I like the animation style. I'd be curious to see what they do, because I know like the big villain of it's the Parasite, and there's also like Lobos in it and Martian Manhunter. So I'm like, it's not necessarily going to be a 1-to-1. So maybe one of these days I'll get a copy of the disc. I'll go to my local video store here, Rough Cut Video, put an order for it, because I love getting physical media, and just sit down and watch it. Because, like, twist my rubber arm to enjoy a Superman story. I'm like, and, especially one like this, getting back on topic, because this is like Nazis and punching out evil and just the, like, I get the feeling that the Tomorrowverse team really understand the assignment, because God damn it, the moment you cue this thing up, they're like, oh yeah, it's a Golden Age joint. Yeah, it's a 1940s period movie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, they literally start with like turning on an old style projector. And I was like, yep, here we go. Yep. I'm on board.
Yeah. I mean, it was a fun film. And, and I think, just to get off topic for another minute here, but
off topic. When have we been off topic ever in this episode, Perry? When have we ever gone off the rails? None of you can prove anything.
But that Superman origin in All-Star Superman that Grant Morrison did you reference, because James Gunn has talked about how big of a fan he is of that book. I do wonder if he's going to use that origin beat in Superman Legacy now.
I mean, you've got to at this point, because, we've seen the origin over and over and over again. Like, if you want to do it, just do it with the dialogue, and just do like recreations of the, Frank Quietly art. Like remember in Spider-Man 2 where they revisit the events of Spider-Man 1 with those awesome
that'd be awesome art. Yeah.
Like, just doomed planet, desperate scientists, and just go through that, and then we cut to just Superman in space. Like, or you do that Paul Dini opening that Paul Dini wanted to do for a Superman 1. Do you know that one?
No, I don't.
Okay, so a couple years ago, many moons ago actually, when Paul Dini and Bruce Timm were guests, and Alan Burnett were guests at the Calgary Expo. We were friends with a gentleman who ran the show, and so we had a chance to meet a lot of the celebrities when they came. We all had like a pizza dinner because we were helping out and volunteering. And so I sat with Paul Dini and his wife Misty Lee. And, we were talking shop, and he talked about how, like, he had an idea for the opening of a Superman movie, but it would never see the light of day, that he said. And so basically, all right, this is pretty fucking cool. I'm going to try to replicate it. This is a conversation from over 20 years ago, and I am a Finding Dory kind of person. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, but these are the rough beats. So we open on Apocalypse, and there's Darkseid giving a speech to like an army of parademons. Like, and he's going like, triumph of the will, all that kind of shit. And, we start to slowly pan out. And we pan out further and further. You see the fire pits of Apocalypse. You see the entire world, this fascist shithole just floating in space with New Genesis off in the distance. And then all of a sudden, you see this distant point of light. And slowly we move back in space, back in space, back in space, back in space, until all of a sudden we're moving forward with what we thought was that glint, but we don't get a good look at it. And so we're just watching as this thing, this forward momentum keeps going, scums up to Apocalypse, comes through the atmosphere, comes over the rally, and then fucking Superman just devastates Darkseid, like just punches him in the damn face, like that two flying, like two fists forward Superman thing, and just levels Darkseid, like bricks and shit are falling off his face. Superman has hit him so hard, and we open with that. Like Superman storms Apocalypse and fucking wrecks Darkseid's shit, and I'm like, sir. I can't. I'm like mid-bite of my pizza. I'm like looking at him like, are you kidding me? Like that was the craziest. So good. I would love for something with that energy. Like, yeah, you all want Darkseid. Well, here he is. Fucking problem solved.
And there he goes.
Superman. Yeah, there he goes. Superman drags Darkseid to Oa. They put him in a science cell, and then there you go. First major problem solved. I was like, that is baller as hell.
Although the problem is then, what do you do after that, though? Like, I could definitely understand. I totally know why he says that. You know,
it'll never see the light of day, because it's like once you do that magic trick, it's like the Daffy Duck bit. I can only do that once.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. It would be a Superman short film. Like if it was a short film. Like, holy shit.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, that'd be an awesome
amazing. Like that one guy, there's that one animator on YouTube. He did a couple of Superman in the Golden Age kind of shorts. And he had the actor who originally played the first Superboy from the Superboy TV show to play Clark and Superman. And his wife plays Lois Lane. It's a little brief thing. It's like only a couple seconds. And it's basically what I wanted when I first saw Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. We're going to get to the movie, folks. I promise you. And like with all the flying robots. And I was like, man, if the Golden Age Superman just showed up in the middle of this, I would flip out. Like a period Superman movie? Oh my God, stop it. Like adapt Tom DeHaven's It's Superman.
Oh,
and just have it be a period Superman movie. Oh my God. Inject it into my veins. A chance to see Superman actually lift the actual car and smash it to shit and just briefly recreate the Action Comics #1 cover. Stop it. It's too powerful. It's too powerful. I would be the happiest boy in the world, but that movie would only be made for like me and maybe you, Perry. Like we'd be the only ones in the theater. Like, but this is amazing though. Nobody else would get it.
All right. No, probably not. Well, I'm gonna correct that. I'm pretty sure Anthony Desiato would dig it as well. So we got
we got
it's
the
that's like the three. That's the three.
That's the three of us munching popcorn. Maybe Michael Bailey. We could bring him in as the four of us would all go and we would watch it. So crazy.
All right. But Justice Society. So one of the things I thought was interesting about this was the actual Justice Society team they chose to represent the team here, because you've got
it's lean and mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've got, Wonder Woman who, and that was my first clue that this was another reality, right? When they said when it's Diana, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here. So it's not going to be, because my first impression when I'd seen like the trailer and stuff, like I thought it would be Hippolyta, like it was in the 90s series.
In the JSA comics, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. One of the few things John Byrne ever did that was actually pretty cool.
Oh, was that John Byrne who came up with that idea?
It was Byrne, and during the Gateway City arc, when he was writing and drawing Wonder Woman, he came up with the idea of having Hippolyta go back in time and be the Golden Age Wonder Woman, and that was kind of the origin of that. So, tip of the hat to him before his tragic disappearance. So.
I did not know that. Like, I actually thought that was as a result of, because I remember Hippolyta was in, Morrison's JLA run, and that was based on like there was like a Death of Wonder Woman story. I've never read any Wonder Woman comic books, so I'm not
the hugest Wonder Woman fan, but I did read the Byrne run because I went through a pretty heavy Byrne phase. So
yeah, so like I'm totally just speaking from like second and third hand knowledge here, but I remember that Hippolyta replaced Diana in the Justice League for a brief period of time, and then shortly after that was when the JSA run came out. So I thought the whole thing about her being in the Justice Society and all that, I thought that was, based off what was happening with the Wonder Woman books at that time. So I didn't realize it went as far back as Burns' run. So that's I just learned something new today.
Wild, yeah.
So that was my first clue that I'm like, okay, we're dealing with another reality here. Like he's
Something's
gone.
up.
They're not doing the post-crisis JSA where they were like the lead into the modern age and all that. Instead, we are doing the Earth 1, Earth 2 version things. And that was my first clue that I'm like, oh, I bet Superman's going to show up then. But then the rest of the team though, right? Obviously Jay Garrick, totally makes sense. Like in every single like JSA thing I've seen, you always see Jay Garrick there. Yeah. And Hawkman too makes a lot of sense. I know he's got a lot of association with the JSA, especially like you said, John's brought him back in that title. And then you've got, Dr. Fate is not really a member of the team. He just has he's just kind of like there.
Yeah, he's the MacGuffin essentially.
Right.
Like
yeah.
He helps out. He drops a lot of cryptic lines that now in retrospect I'm like, oh, that's teeing up for something else. Yeah. But yeah.
And then we got but then we get Our Man and the Dinah Drake Black Canary, and I thought, and then like one of the things that surprised me, and I'm like, there's no oh god, I'm gonna feel like such an idiot when I'm kind of blanking on his name, the Green Lantern,
Alan Scott, Green Lantern.
Alan Scott, yes. I was so surprised. I'm like, why isn't Alan Scott in this? Well, that was like my biggest shocker. That
I think at this point the Green Lantern movie in the Tomorrowverse hadn't come out yet. I think it's like
this was the second one. Yeah. This was the second movie in the Tomorrowverse.
This is the second joint. So I don't think they touched that ground yet, but I did find it interesting, like the Dinah Lance Black Canary, where it's like, oh, she has the sonic powers. So that's kind of like a mix of the classic and modern. And by the end of it, when she takes off the domino mask, and it's like, oh yeah, she's fully Black Canary now. Like, holy shit. Yeah. And of course, Our Man, who I have a lot of affection for, because he is, of course, the only superhero chivalrous enough to tell you his weakness in his name.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. All you got to do is wait 60 minutes. All you got to do is box him in.
I could not stop thinking about that the entire time. Because, I've been doing... I did this comic book about Paragons of Earth with a bunch of Golden Age public domain characters. And, I've been diving into these characters and researching them and thinking about, ways to use them. And just like reading through some of these descriptions, I'm just like, man, the writers back then had some really wonky ideas for gimmicks for these characters. Because I'm like, because my impression of Our Man was based on what I'd seen from the robotic Our Man from like the JSA series and from when he popped up in JLA. So I'm thinking like, he's got some like time related abilities, but it's like, no, he just has like super strength, but it's only for an hour and he can only do it once a day. I'm like, that is like the worst fucking superpower to have. It is so inconvenient.
Pretty much. It's right up there with the red bee and his belt of trained bees for just like, what the hell are you what are you smoking? And can I have a quick toke of that? Because it must be potent. But I have an affection for Our Man as a concept because it's just so goofy and yet it fits in so well. And like, oh, hey, and just for anybody out there who's into Critical Role or anything, Our Man, Rex Tyler, is voiced by Matt Mercer, who is the dungeon master of Critical Role and also the impetus behind the animated series on Amazon Prime. So that was a fun bit of, I was like, oh shit, I recognize that voice. And so, and Our Man himself as a concept, like it's just a neat idea where it's like, oh, well, this was back in the day when pharmaceuticals were our friends. Like there was no opioid crisis. Like you had like the cure for polio and all this kind of stuff. And like pharmaceuticals were meant to save the day. And so, Rex Tyler, a chemist, comes up with a formula that makes him the Golden Age Superman. And he does pull off a lot of Golden Age Superman stuff before Superman shows up. And spoiler alert, everybody. But yeah, it's just like he does a lot of cool stuff. And like he is like, hey man, we got to hurry up. I'm down to my last 10 minutes before like it's over. And like he's managing to like flip tanks and like rip the armor open and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty cool. And it's interesting to have a superhero that has that limitation because, that would make for a very interesting kind of, like they explored it in the more modern age stuff where like Miraclo has a lot of drawbacks. Like it wrecks
Hmm.
your body. And so,
Right.
Rex Tyler Jr. Suffered a lot when he was in Infinity Inc. Like there was a whole arc in there about how Miraclo just basically devastated his body. And so,
I had read about that because I was really curious about this guy when I found out that out from the movie because I never knew what his powers were before this, and I look it up and I'm like,
Mhm.
and I saw all that stuff about the the addiction to it and how it had wrecked his body and all that. I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty interesting, but
Yeah.
I
I actually
just can't get over that hour time limit, and I can only do it once a day.
it's interesting. And of course there was the robot chicken bit where like they made a joke of the hour man, Miraculous like Viagra, gets you going for an hour, and that kind of stuff. And there were some interesting stuff that kind of fell out of that. I'm not sure if it was in JSA or another thing where it's like they kind of traced like the Miraclo development and they kind of like linked it to Venom in that, it's this
Oh
performance enhancing thing. Like, I'm not sure. Take it with a grain of salt. That might just be
no,
my
no, no! I
fanboy
think there's
brain.
that
Mm,
I don't know for
yeah.
sure, but that rings a bell of familiarity in
Mhm.
my head. So I
'Cause there
think
was an
I think
arc, I think,
there's
yeah.
something connected to that.
Mhm.
Um,
But he's an interesting
and then
character, and
wasn't that used in Arrow? Then wasn't that drug that Slade is
uh,
using?
I wanna
There's like
say yes.
Mirakudu or something like that, or it was like inspired by it
It
or something.
referenced Tyler Pharmaceuticals a couple times in the Berlanti verse, but they never actually gave us Our Man did show up in Stargirl, but that's a different Earth. Yeah, so
Mhm.
yeah. It's all interconnected and interwoven. But I just like that character, and there was, there's some great bits of business with him in later JSA stuff where like Miraclo is very obviously addictive in certain books in the flashbacks with the JSA in World War II. Charles McNider, aka Dr. Midnight, is always on his case. Like, you really should go easy with that stuff, man. You have no idea
Mhm.
what kind of long-term side effects it'll have. And Rex Tyler's like, pshaw, let me just pop another pill in a couple hours, I'll be fine. But yeah, he's a fun character. It was an interesting pull. I would have thought like maybe Robot Man, or if you needed like a brick, like I don't know, like I mean Wildcat. I mean, I love Wildcat. He's
Well,
kind
yeah,
of like
Wildcat's like when you think
yeah,
of the JSA, at least for me, again, not having
mhm.
that much familiarity with him,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think my mind goes right to like Alan Scott and Jay Garrick. Those are the first two I think of
Oh,
automatically, and
without
then
a
later,
doubt, yeah.
and then if I was going to think about it a little bit more, I'd be like, oh yeah, then you got Wildcat in there, and then you've got
Hmm.
Hawkman. So those are like the ones I'd think of right off the top of my head, but I
Yeah.
would not think of Our Man first, and
Hmm.
I also
I
wouldn't think
appreciated the
of
poll, but I was like, holy shit.
yeah. So yeah,
But
I
yeah.
thought the lineup they went with was interesting because I think even people
Mhm.
who, unless you're a fan of the JSA, I think, but if you're not a fan of the JSA, but you've heard of them before, I don't think you would be
Mhm.
expecting this lineup. So again, it was kind of there's some interesting choices there.
Oh, definitely. Like it's a great lean and mean lineup that kind of evokes like the kind of, for lack of a better term, lower scale of the Golden Age heroes, where it's like
Hmm.
you got one super powerful brick, and then you've got Hawkman, who's kind of like a winged fighter. You got Dinah Lance as the scrapper. You've got like Hourman as the tank, as another tank, but he's on a time limit. And you've
Hmm.
got Jay Garrick, who ostensibly can just pluck guns out of people's hands, and like there's that whole sequence where he just ruins that entire Nazi platoon's good day and just
Hmm.
takes them apart as super speed. And you understand why so many writers are like speedsters, man.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So what were some
good
other things
stuff.
that
Good
kind of
writing.
jumped out at you this time?
Uh, well, I watching it again for the first time. I appreciated the touches. Like, they open with opening credits, they list the stars, they go through like this whole black and white sequence, and just starting off with we start in the world of the modern day, and it was nice to see. It was nice to see them tee up things that now I know are going to pay off later, like Barry and Iris and their relationship issues, where like Barry's like he's very jazzed to be with her, but at the same time he's worried about everything. He's trying to
Hmm.
micromanage things down to the last thing, and Iris is just like, hey man, you just got to be here now. That's all I really want. And like are we doing anything? It's been years. Are we a couple? Are we not a couple? And that was kind of interesting. And then
Mhm.
we lead into like they're on a day trip to Metropolis from Central City. So it's kind of interesting to be like, okay, so how close is Central City to Metropolis? Like, did they hop a bus or did Barry just carry her? Like, how did that, did they take the picnic basket? But I'm not getting lost in those reads because forget
I mean,
all that. Yeah.
navigation in the DC stuff has never really made
Mhm.
much sense between these
Never
fictional
worked.
cities. I mean, I remember when in Smallville, apparently, like Metropolis was supposedly 3 hours away. They had said in the early seasons, and then later
Yeah.
on, Clark and Lois are like commuting to Metropolis from Smallville.
Yeah, it's like one bus ride away, and you're just like,
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't know, like these comic book geography is all over the yard, but
Yeah, or
but
then in
forget all of that.
or Batman v Superman, where Metropolis and Gotham are just right across the bay from each other.
You said the unholy word. Trying not to think about that. Um, yeah, but anyway, but forget all of that because we cut to like that awesome like Superman Brainiac fight, and the
Hmm.
Brainiac design is really cool. And there was just some fun bits of business just in terms of like Barry accidentally discovers quote unquote time travel when he goes fast enough to save Superman from the kryptonite bullet, and then
Hmm.
the interactions like where Flash has no idea what's going on because it's very clear that he's still kind of a relative noob, like all the Tomorrowverse heroes are not the experienced like league heroes that we know of.
Right.
So he has no idea what's going on at first. And then, and just all the dynamics between the JSA characters and just the whole bit where like Franklin Delano Roosevelt's there and Steve Trevor makes the whole pitch for the JSA. I was like, yes, yes, this is all that I want. This is all that I
Yeah, I
want.
love that
And
stuff
that
too. I love it when
yeah.
they're able to like actually weave in actual history into superhero
Mhm.
stuff. Like, and it's something that it's not always done well, but when it is so cool.
Well, it is very cool. And like that whole bit where they actually like they showed the map of Europe and there was that very prominent swastika and I was like, "Holy shit,
Mm,
you actually showed it." I know a lot of times these days if you're trying to get it overseas, particularly in Germany, you don't do a lot of that. And
right.
the German soldiers, didn't traditionally wear the swastika that much as far as I know. Like the ground troops, you had certain officers and whatnot that wore the
Oh, that
armband.
explains it. Because I was wondering about
Mhm.
that. Because at first I thought I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
are they afraid to actually call them
Are they afraid
Nazis?
to
Because I saw
actually
the
show it?
right.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that makes sense. Then later they showed the Nazi symbol. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wait, so no, that's not it.
Absolutely,
So,
and that's
that
not
makes
it. Yeah,
sense.
but I think because and the thing like, and this is going to be one of my little kind of fetches, but don't worry about it because in the main I liked the movie, but I was just like, man, if we could get like Baron Blitzkrieg or Axis America or fucking Per Daguerreotyne in this piece, because Per Daguerreotyne would be amazing because he's a
Mm.
time traveling villain, so he'd be like,
Oh,
who the fuck are you?
that would have
Exactly.
been a really good. Yeah, that's interesting. They didn't go
Yeah,
that route because you're right. That would have been very interesting given
that would have been
the fact that
interesting.
you've got Barry coming in from another Earth. So that would be another clue
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like there's something
Something's
not right
off.
about
Yeah.
how he got here. Yeah, yeah. Now something else I was wondering about, and again, this is me coming into the Just Society from like second and third hand knowledge, so I could be wrong, and
Mhm.
you being the guy who's a little bit more knowledgeable, you can correct me. But
Mhm. Sure.
um, my understanding of Hawkman is that he's like the most hardcore member of the JSA, and here it felt like he was a little bit timid compared to Diana. Did you get that feeling too?
I get the feeling that with the Diana with Diana and Hawkman, I think that they played up that I think he's older and he's a bit more seasoned and
Okay.
he's willing to step back and he takes more of a mentor role, particularly to Black Canary,
Hmm.
and kind of takes her under his wing, and is kind of like trying to tell her not to turn her back on the world, which I found was
Hmm.
interesting. Like Hawkman is basically like Diana's lieutenant, which I find very interesting because in the comics themselves, Hawkman's the leader of the All Star Squadron. When they're out in the field, like the All
Hmm.
Star Squadron being the name of like Roosevelt's assembled force of superheroes,
And
but
that like
he's
a precursor to the JSA?
well, the JSA started up first, and
Oh,
then
okay.
when the war kicked off, Franklin Delano Roosevelt assembled all the heroes in North America and ostensibly was like, you are going to fight for American freedom. You will all be known as the All-Star Squadron. So it was all the heroes, the JSA and all the independent heroes,
Okay.
like the Jester, the Human Bomb, like freedom fighters, that sort of stuff. But there was a unique wrinkle in that you would think with all the Golden Age heroes and all the and the Spectre, for God's sake, you would think the war would be over in about 0.92 seconds. But the wrinkle was, they even mention it at the top of this movie, Hitler is obsessed with artifacts, like mystical relics and whatnot. So in working with the Japanese sorcerer, the Dragon King, they used the Spear of Longinus to create mystical barriers around the Axis nations. And so what would happen is any superheroes with powers crossed the border, their allegiance would flip from the Allies to the Axis. And so that explained why World War II was fought by just, regular Joes and Janes, or the non-powered heroes like Wildcat, the Atom, Commander Steel. Like, they would go behind enemy lines, but they didn't have powers, so they weren't subject to the prohibition. So that was
right. I remember reading about that, or hearing about that, I should say.
But the All-Star Squadron was kind of like the assembled group of Golden Age heroes. So the JSA is just, the team. Yeah. So unique wrinkle.
Okay. Yeah. So it seems then they kind of like combined the JSA with the All-Star Squadron then with
essentially,
Roosevelt gathering together. Yeah.
And mixed in a little like Invaders DNA, like where like maybe they're public heroes, but they're more like top secrets. So actually maybe more like BPRD in the Hellboy movies, where it's like nobody knows. Like, we're just keeping this on the DL. All that stuff is just hearsay, because they've got a staff reporter, Shakespeare, who is writing all their essentially the propaganda and making sure it centers the soldiers first. So their activities on the down. Hawkman is a prototype weapon that they're using. So, which I thought was kind of neat. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the Black Canary thing too. Like, was it just me, or did you detect like some sort of a little bit more than just like a mentor-mentee relationship with them?
Oh, Black Canary very much wants it to be more of something deeper, because I think she's quite smitten with him, and he's like, "Well, what about your American detective friend?" But she doesn't realize, like, when he's talking about his soulmate, he's talking about somebody else, and unfortunately, she wants a little more, but unfortunately, Hawkman, like, he's destined to be with Shayera till the end of time. So, like, they find each other and then they lose each other. That's the blessing and the curse of the Hawks. Yeah. So, but I did like his portrayal in the movie. I thought he was much different from the kind of snarly Hawkman that I've kind of known from like as much as I love the Jeff Johns run, there is that great issue where Green Arrow shows up and is just like, let me see if I get this straight. You are thousands of years old, and you are stalking an 18-year-old girl because she is the reincarnation of your love. Buddy, can we have a conversation about this? And Carter is like, and do you think you have a leg to stand on, Ollie? Do you think you are going to talk to me about fidelity? Holy shit. It was great. I'm munching popcorn the whole time. And then Dinah literally has to break them both up. It's amazing. And, what's that one? My favorite line of it is, my favorite line from that issue is, there's an ancient Egyptian word for you, Oliver. And he's like, really, what's that? Schmuck. They both just die laughing. So good.
Yeah. Oh man, that was in was that Winnick's Green Arrow run? I think, right?
I think it was either Winnick's Green Arrow, or I think it was Kevin Smith in the.
No, definitely wasn't Kevin Smith. I knew that. I know it was. Okay. I don't think so. No, I'm pretty sure it was Winnick's then. Yeah, because I remember reading that fairly recently. Because I picked up Winnick's Green Arrow trades, or the ones that are actually available. Fairly recently.
About a Golden Age hero that would have been appropriate here, like Green Arrow, like put him in his classic like Robin Hood looking outfit and have him show up here throwing some boxing glove arrows. That would have been amazing. So
that would have been interesting too. I was also, because they they have Wonder Woman, they've got Superman too, but they don't have any mention of Batman either. So I thought that was also
which was wild, because when we picked this movie, I'd mentioned maybe we do Gotham by Gaslight, and you mentioned that you were kind of Batmaned out. So we ended up with a little movie bit, where there's neither hide nor hair of this guy. So that was actually pretty handy. I thought that was pretty fun. So
It was, yeah. It was definitely it was a good move on their part, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be talking about this movie right now. but
exactly.
but I did think it was an interesting omission when they've got, 2/3 of the Trinity there.
You would think there might be some mention of like maybe there was like maybe a newspaper in Metropolis where like caped bat creature sighted in Gotham or something like that, like winged creature or something. But
Right, or
they
like
had
even
their
like a mention during Steve Trevor's briefing or something about like,
exactly
about
like
the guy in
there's
Gotham,
all manner, the guy in Gotham. We tried to reach out to him, but we couldn't really get a hold of him.
Mhm.
He's not very trustful of the old government, but
Right.
yeah, it was good. And of course, uh, just the overall like the Indiana Jones-ish kind of plot where it's like they've got the
Mhm.
mystical relics, and then we've got to go here to break a code, and like we find Dr. Fate in the castle, and like, whew, like so much good stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, that castle set is amazing, and when Diana
Mhm.
just fucking storms the gate, like she. Like, we haven't talked about how fucking brutal she is in this movie. Like,
She
holy
is,
shit.
yeah.
What
We had
she
talked
takes
about
on. Yeah.
Wonder Woman fairly
Mm-hmm.
recently. I think it was like maybe the last episode I'd recorded here, and
Mm.
it was and one of the things we commented on, how like I talked about how like in a lot of times in more modern times they tend to overemphasize Diana's warrior qualities, whereas
Mm-hmm.
in the Wonder Woman movie they did a nice job of striking a balance. Like she is this
Mm-hmm.
person
Mm-hmm.
who's all about peace and love and all that, but she'll throw down when she's got to. And I
Oh,
thought they
hell
did a
yeah.
really good job. This one is very much much more like, I'm going to throw down, I'm going to bash your face
Yeah.
in type of Wonder Woman.
Yeah. When she takes on that cadre of Nazis at the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, those men are all dead. They are
Hmm.
all dead. They are not getting back up. Um, but then you come to realize as the movie goes on, something happened to Themyscira. Like there's a
Hmm.
line where she's like, what happened to my island could happen to the world. And I was like, holy shit, did the Nazis nuke Themyscira?
Mm.
Did they destroy Themyscira somehow? Like, holy shit, is Diana the last Amazon? That's crazy. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. But
Hmm.
that's later down the road in the movie because we're doing the MacGuffin chase, and the storming of the castle is amazing. Barry's reaction to being in ostensibly the past
Hmm.
is really great. Where it's like, oh, I can't affect the future. Yeah, I saw that movie. Got it. And all due credit to the voice actor who plays Barry, but I kind of wish we had Rosenbaum, man. I kind of wish we had Rosenbaum because I
Hmm.
think a lot of those humorous beats would pop a little better. But I understand. I understand why we can't all have
Who also
Rosenbaum.
Matt Bomer, who also does Negative Man on Doom Patrol.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
pretty
so
sure. I'm just
that's
double
why his
checking.
voice sounded familiar.
Yeah,
Because I was like, this guy sounds familiar. And I'm not sure if I know Darren Chris from anything, but I was like, there's a familiar quality to his voice,
he
too.
does have a familiar quality. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But he plays a great part. Like when he's playing Shakespeare in the movie. Like the first time I saw this, I'm gonna just level with you, Perry. I was absolutely snowed. I didn't
Mhm.
realize what was happening until a certain scene happened, and I was like, oh shit. Oh
Yeah, and
shit.
in fact, and it's funny because I'm thinking of the whole
Mhm,
the whole thing about Superman. It's like, how can you not tell?
mhm.
Just the
Yeah,
glasses and that's it, and then you're
glasses.
able to be
Yep.
fooled. Yeah, and then here he is walking around right in front of me, and I don't pick up on it. Same voice
Peanut
actor too.
mustache. Yes, like I was completely fooled. Like, oh my god, it was brilliant. It wasn't until his encounter with Commandy in the cell where I was like, holy shit,
Mm.
that's who it is. That's who it amazing. Like, and then you talk about stopping mid mouthful of popcorn. I was like, holy shit, is this kid is this kid is Commandy. This kid is Commandy and he's giving him the Superman
Oh,
suit. Like I was sent back
I
in
did not
time
even
to
I did
find
not
you.
even catch that. Oh wow,
Where
I
I
did
was
not even
like, I
pick
was
up on
sent
that.
back to find you because he's got the package. I have this package for you. I have to get it to you, and it's the Superman uniform. And I was like, are you telling me that's the Superman uniform from the future where they're all doing the Olympics to try to be worthy of that uniform, and then they send him back in time to give it to the Golden Age Superman? Are you kidding me? Like, there's so many bits that now that I know the Crisis on Infinite Earths exists, that I'm like, oh shit, this all ties back into this and that. Especially when we
Mhm.
find out who the real villain of the piece is. Because
Mhm.
buckle up, kids, it's out of nowhere. Of all
Yeah.
the villains they could have picked, I was like, Ultra Humanite, Alexei Luthor, like somebody from the period. And it was technically, but technically not, as we will find out in due course. But holy shit, I
Well, I mean,
stopped again in popcorn.
let's just get to it right now then.
Oh yeah, it's a psycho
I
pirate.
mean, it's the Psycho
It's
Pirate.
the
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the fucking psycho pirate. But it's he's a Nazi, and I was like, okay, bold choice. Making an already pretty skeezy character even skeezier.
Mhm.
But again, this comes to one of my other quibbles where it's like, motherfucker, if you are gonna do this, you have to do it right. He's not in
Mhm.
his real clothes. He's not in the outfit.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna do it, like if you're gonna have him play the Vizier for a while, have it turn out that he was using an Atlantean imaging inducer or some shit, and it turns out, surprise, it's the Psycho Pirate. Like
Right.
shit, that would have been amazing. On like maybe one of the golden age, like Jay Garrick's like, oh shit, it's the Psycho Pirate. And
Mhm.
Barry's like, who? And it's like, don't let him get a good look at you. Like, just, oh my God, yes. But, you know, and I never thought I would see Aquaman Sieg Heil. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, okay, okay, I guess we're doing this. And did you detect when you're looking at Aquaman? Did you detect a little Namor in his design? Like the art style? Like I saw a little Namor in his face. Like the hair, of course, is blonde, but I was like,
Mhm.
he's definitely filling that Namor from the Invaders role, but also mixed in with early Namor, where it's just, I'm just going to come to the surface and wreck the surface world. Where, you know, it's obviously Psycho Pirate whispering in his ear, but there's a little of that DNA in there too, which I thought was pretty cool. So
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
mean,
oh
now that
shit.
I didn't think about that at the time, but now that you mention it, and I'm just looking back at at some of the screenshots of him, I
Mm-hmm.
can see it. Yeah, and definitely,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and definitely the whole like attacking the surface world type stuff. So I think this is probably some of that Invaders influence you were talking about.
Absolutely, because there's some moments when Diana is handling her shield. She does the kickstand. Like
Hmm.
she kicks the shield up and catches it like Captain
Yeah.
America. And I was like, I understood that reference.
Yes.
Like there's some fun DNA. There's some nods of the hat to Joe Johnston and his team for First
Hmm.
Avenger, where it's just like I see a couple shots here, like when they're all like when basically Steve Trevor is like that cop in Dark Knight Returns. We're like, hey man, you're in for a show tonight, son. And you watch the
Hmm.
JSA just pimp on up to wreck shit. You got Jay
Hmm.
Garrick doing those stretches, like everybody's kind of like getting ready, like, oh shit, it's about to go down. So that was pretty fun. And yes, that DNA was there. And Psycho Pirate as a Nazi, I can kind of see it. But then
Hmm.
later he disappears, and I was like, oh shit, now I get it. Oh, now I get it. He's he's just stirring shit. He's been summoned back by his master. Because there's that one point
Hmm.
during Dr. Fate's whole screed where it's like he's jumping, his mind is jumping through time. And at the end, he's like, it has begun. And I was like, oh shit, the crisis. The
Hmm.
crisis just started. Yep, that's where Psycho Pirate went. Psycho Pirate went back to his master. Like, yep,
Hmm. Yeah.
yep, 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 yep. So that was pretty fucking dope. And just the whole bit of like, it was an interesting pull for the main villain. Although I do think, having watched it a second time, the seams are kind of on the plot because I get that they want to do both like the big evil supervillain Atlantean battle for Metropolis, and then the Nazis show up kind of as an afterthought. But we've been
Hmm.
fighting Nazis for the first half of it, and I'm just like DC has a stable of like reprehensible Nazi characters they could have liberally had throw down with the JSA. And it
Right.
just feels a little weird. Like I understand like it was cool when Aquaman went to the trench. Like then when they mentioned the trench, my antenna as an
Hmm.
Aquaman reader started quivering because I'm like, oh shit, we're about to go Lovecraft, everybody. We're about to go deep one Lovecraft. And of course, the giant kaiju, the monsters attacking the city, very cool. But it's just like it was weird how none of the Atlanteans were like, "Hey, has the king ever mentioned like fuck the surface world before? Because I've never
Hmm.
really heard of it. I mean, we just kind of like nobody questioned it. They just went full Nazi mode and attacked the surface world with barely a flicker, like barely a like they just kind of became Cobra for lack of a better word. And I'm just like, again, not a deal breaker, but I was just like, okay.
It's an
I,
interesting choice. Yeah. I mean, I guess after having watched the two Aquaman movies, I guess I can
yeah,
kind of understand it because, if it's
yeah.
the whole thing
They're
that
very like,
the only thing stopping Aquaman from attacking, the only thing stopping
mm,
Atlantis from attacking the surface world is Aquaman himself. So
as
like,
an
I
advocate.
guess yeah. So I guess I could understand. That's probably the way I
Mhm.
explained it away in my head canon.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a deal breaker by any means.
Right.
It was just one of those moments where, like, I'm sitting there, I'm munching my popcorn, and I'm just like, it's been a while since we've seen the Nazis, and I'm kind of here to watch superheroes just wreck Nazi shit. I mean, it's fun to watch
Yeah.
them fight mer people and monsters, but, and then the bombers show up, and we get that, oh my God, we get the best thing. Like, of course, like when we meet Shakespeare and he explains that his like mom and pa Kent died when he was 3 years old. So he
Hmm.
grew up in the foster system. So he don't
Yeah.
believe in nothing no more. He's very much kind of like, I'm not, I just keep my head down and I don't get involved. Like I just don't want to do it. And, Diana raises the very salient point that everyone should know is that if you just let fascists be fascists, you're not really much better than they are, because fascism exists to be punched in the face.
Yes. Yeah.
Told right.
That was a fist pump moment when Diana said that.
Yeah, you're no better than the Nazis, and it's clear that you see on like Shakespeare's face, like he's thinking about it, and it's very clear the
Hmm.
guilt is starting to work on him. So when he comes back in the 11th hour, like I'm sitting there like, man, this fight's going pretty bad. I wonder if anybody's gonna come in and save the day. I wonder if that's
Hmm.
gonna happen. And of course, yeah, he shows up, and it's not quite an homage to that issue of Justice Society where Joe Staton draws that awesome shot of Superman just wrecking a Nazi plane, like, and
Hmm.
the It's Superman like logo beneath him. It's like, yes, Superman, punch Nazis in their fucking turkey necks. Let's just fucking go. And he wrecks them. He wrecks those planes, and it's great. And you kind of see that he's not as assured as the Superman of Earth One, for lack of a better term, because
Hmm.
he's doing the leaps, he's doing the
He's
jumps.
doing
He's
the
not
leaps. Yeah.
quite as
Yeah.
he hasn't quite discovered that he can fly yet.
Or
So
also,
that's
there's that line when they ask him like, "You're invulnerable," and he's like, "No, I'm just really tough," or something along those
yeah, just
lines.
I'm thick skinned. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm thick.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
a little thicker skinned. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you are, bud. Yeah, you are.
So yeah, well, I think I kind of answered my own question about why they didn't have Alan Scott in this, because if you're gonna
Mhm.
have this idea of like Superman being like this big pivotal figure who comes in, he's kind of got to
Mhm.
be more powerful than everybody else. And if you've got Alan
Yeah.
Scott in there and you're dealing with Golden Age Superman, he's not as impressive.
Yes, exactly. You've got the magic ring that can do almost anything, and unless those planes were made of wood, it's not gonna be all that much of a problem for old Alan
That
Scott. I mean,
that could also be why we didn't really see Dr. Fate participate actively in the Nazi punching ass side of things.
oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't have the all powerful like Lord of Order, and you certainly don't have the Spectre, because the Spectre would have solved
Right.
all
Yeah,
that problem in
obviously.
about 3 seconds. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, when you have the wrath of God incarnate, you don't really, you're not sweating for much. So, but yeah, I get why they did it, and it's a great here comes the cavalry moment. Like it's a
Hmm.
fist pump moment, absolutely, and it's nice to like see, and it's interesting to look at the design for the Earth 2 Superman, who looks a little more pinched, like
Hmm.
a little more. His features are a little more wan than a little more withdrawn than the Superman of Earth One, who's very bold and colorful and bright. And it's just like,
Hmm.
and I love, and I haven't mentioned that Darren Criss does a great job of portraying both of them. Where Barry asks Clark early on, like, "Hey, what's the plan? Punch bad guy in the face, duck
Hmm.
the beam." Everybody goes home happy. It's just like
Hmm.
it's just a great little like he's very confident. He's not a jerk, but he's confident in himself. Like he's been around the block a time or two, knows what kryptonite is. So it
Right.
was interesting. Like there's a nice little dual bit of business, and the two Flashes have some great stuff too, where they each kind of teach each other some of their speed tricks. Where it's
Yes.
like
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, Wally shows him how to use like the
Barry.
funnels. or Barry, sorry. Barry shows him how to use the like the turbo, like spinning his hands really fast to help the plane get down.
Mhm.
And Jay had never considered that before. You see him look at his hands and be like, "Holy shit, I can do that too!" And there's the whole bit where like Jay explains like, "Hey man, when I was starting out, I learned how to phase through walls and stuff." And Barry's like, "You can do that?" Like
Mhm.
it's great. There's some fun bits of business between those two as well. So
Yeah.
fun contrasts. Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk like something about the Superman thing. First off, I love that they gave him the more depowered Golden Age version of it, and like I said, I think that makes sense why they left some other characters off the roster. So all of that was really cool. I like that they went with like the Roman style boots, even. But
Oh, so cool.
one thing I can't understand
Mm-hmm.
is you've got the Golden Age Superman here, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got who's even though it wasn't from the comics, it was from the serials, but the thing that people most associate with the Golden Age Superman is that flesher symbol, right? With the yellow
Yes.
outline and the black background.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you
Yeah.
not use that? It's the perfect opportunity to use that.
I think the temptation was there. I think they tried to strike a balance between the modern day Superman looking and the Jerry Ordway Earth 2 Superman logo. Like if you ever looked at some stills from Action Comics or All-Star Squadron number 21, like there's that iconic like first page where Superman is on the cover and the
Mhm.
Superman logo is not quite the Superman logo of the modern day. It's kind of got its
Yeah.
own stylized vibe, and I think they kind of shot for that. Now, of course, in an ideal world where we ran things and everything was cool, absolutely, I would have him look like the Fleischer Superman,
Yeah.
110%, because that's a crisp look. But I don't know if, like, I mean, again, the Fleischer Superman is kind of public domain because you see a lot of those like box set DVD or like collections that are
Well,
like,
yeah, but I mean, they also used
"Where's
the
that
suit in. They also used it in. What is it?
in yeah, Superman and
Superman and
Lois." Yeah, I
Lois.
know.
Yeah.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, but yeah, I think that might have been a missed opportunity. But maybe they were just like, "Look, we kind of want to make it so they're more like kind of similar." I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not. We'd have to get like one of the animators like in here and just be like, "Hey,
Right.
man, like, what were you thinking when you were
Yeah. I
designing
mean,
that?"
personally,
Because
I definitely say it's a missed opportunity. That was one thing that disappointed
yeah,
me. I'm like,
yeah,
because as soon as I figured out he was Superman, I'm like, oh,
mhm.
he's gonna put on. It's gonna be the Golden Age Superman. He's gonna have the Flesher symbol on there. And then when I looked at it, I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that's kind of a
Yeah, it's
bummer.
not. It's cool, but it doesn't quite pop the way you want it to pop.
Right.
Yeah, I
I
know
mean,
what you mean.
it's
But
not. I mean, now we're getting into nitpicky territory here, right?
yeah,
Because this is
exactly.
obviously totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I want to stress this. This is a fun movie. Like
It
I
is. Yeah.
liked it a bunch. But
Mhm.
you know, you ask a man for his honest opinion. I'm going to give you my honest opinion, and it's just like
Right.
that
Yeah.
suit's good. Could have been better. That's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I dig it.
Well, also, like, and here's a good question that I think this is probably a good place to kind of start wrapping things up a little bit. But
Yeah,
the
sure,
whole
sure.
idea of, so I mentioned earlier on that like how back when they done originally in the comics when they kind of realized that shared continuity that Marvel's doing is pretty popular. We should probably do that too. And then then like, oh wait, we've got Superman and Batman, who are pretty different from their Golden Age versions. And then we've got, two completely different versions of Flash and Green Lantern. And it's like, how are we
Right.
going to square this circle? And they're like, oh, well, one group is on Earth 1, the other group is on Earth 2. And that was the way they kind of, solved that problem. But and then post crisis came along and they said, oh no, they all existed in the same universe, and Superman was
Mhm,
inspired by the Justice Society. Now,
mhm,
I don't know. I'm of two minds of this, right? On the one hand,
mhm.
I do kind of like the idea of there having been like these World War II heroes. But on the other hand, I also really like the idea of Superman being the first actual superhero in the DC
Oh
universe.
yeah. I mean
And
that's important. Yeah.
right. So, and I think what they did here was they kind of had their cake and ate it too, right? They have this
Mhm,
idea where, um, Flash is obviously inspired by Superman, right? That's made very clear by his
mhm.
conversation with Iris at the beginning and all that. Um,
Oh yeah.
and and then we get into and at the end of the movie, right? He goes to see Superman again, and he tells him he's like, gives him this idea of starting a team, and it's this idea of like he was inspired by the Justice Society that he had on Earth too, and that's why. So in an
Mhm.
indirect way, the Justice Society did inspire the heroes of the modern day. So it's a cool little way to do that. But where do you kind of stand on this?
Well, getting back to your having your cake and eating it too. I mean, after the crisis, Roy Thomas, God bless him. God bless him. The man never saw an opportunity to try to sew up continuity that he didn't like. He created a book called The Young All Stars, which introduced, like ostensibly like there was Iron Monroe, who is essentially the Golden Age Superman as a younger man.
Oh, okay.
And he's the son of Hugo Danner from Philip Wiley's novel Gladiator.
Yeah.
So that explains why he has the Golden Age Superman power set, essentially. So not necessarily saying that Siegel might have had a copy of Gladiator on his nightstand, but when you read that book, you're like, oh, well, leap an eighth of a mile.
I mean, that and Doc Savage right down to the Fortress of Solitude. I mean,
Clark.
It's kind of hard to deny. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, all, all homages. Absolutely. Tips of the hat. Absolutely. And of course there was Flying Fox, who was kind of like the Batman archetype, but mixed with like an Inuit shaman. So he had like sorceress powers, but he also had a very kind of Batman looking kind of cloak and mask. And of course there was Fury, who would be later tied to Wonder Woman, who was essentially like the Wonder Woman of the piece. Had her ties to the Greek Furies themselves, and would turn into the Blood Avenger if she got too out of control. So there's a little bit of Hulk DNA in there as well. But I think that it's just a matter of I like what this movie has done, and I like how they kind of streamlined it and kind of like make a bit more sense. I'm of two minds. Like, I like the idea of Superman being the first superhero, because really, like all comic book characters, they don't really age. I mean, there's ways a clever writer can come up with a way, like, it's kind of like how when they brought Jay Garrick back in the comics, in the Flash comics.
Or you know what else? And I know a lot of people don't like that. I know this comic's kind of controversial by a lot of comic fans, but Doomsday Clock. I thought what they did with Superman and that was pretty interesting. How they had all this, like this whole idea of like the DC universe is built around Superman. So every time Superman drifts too far, and then like a new DC universe is birthed into being. I thought that was a pretty cool way of really it was a really cool way of really centering the DC universe around Superman, which has not really been the way in the
There's another guy. Another guy who seems to take a lot of the thunder. But yeah, I dig it. Like, it's interesting to explore that element and like Superman as this focal point. So of course, Superman is kind of like, he's the focal point of this team. He's going to be the focal point of the league. And that's very interesting to explore. If it were me if I might put my writer's cap on, like, I think an amazing thing to kind of parallel that would be like the first Golden Age hero is Amazing Man.
Oh,
like
right.
Classic Amazing Man. Like he has a kind of similar kind of like power set, and it would be very interesting for the first superhero of the 1930s to be a black man. That would be really kind of interesting to comment on. And he was a member of the All-Star Squadron. He was very cool, and he has a great design. That classic outfit drawn by Jerry Ordway. That bold A on the center of his chest. Like, I always thought that was cool. Like, I always thought that they kind of missed an opportunity to have him kind of like slot into the Superman role, and would have made for some very interesting stories. Like,
makes me wonder if when the Earth 2 series came along, in the New 52, and they introduced Val Zod, I'm kind of wondering if they were influenced by Amazing Man, and then in that way.
Yeah, man. Like, Val Zod is an amazing character, and it's just like, it's a cool concept to just be like, yeah, maybe like there's this scion of the House of El, or not necessarily House of El, but the House of Zod, that, he's like, hey man, I'm not a villain. I'm just here to help the same way. And like, he's just a very cool, and that outfit pops, man. Like,
it is
like those two, between him and Calvin Ellis, like, whoo, those looks are so amazingly cool.
Well, and that's something else I like that they did here in this version, because if you're going to have an Earth 2 Superman, and I think this, and I could be off base on this because I'm not very familiar with the Earth 2 stuff, but like what Earth 2 Superman ended up becoming by the time we get to like Crisis, he seemed, other than like the gray hair and all that, he didn't seem all that different from Earth 1 Superman.
Not really, yeah.
And so I really like what they did here, how they focused it more on like, this is the Golden Age iteration of him, right? He is
Mhm.
not as powerful. He's much more rough around the edges. He's got a very
Yeah.
different worldview because, as Derek
Mhm.
always said, rest his soul, the true heroes of the DC universe are Jonathan and Martha Kent. And because they're the ones who raised Clark up to become Superman. Without them, you don't get this version of Superman who is like this model of integrity and righteousness and justice. And so you see this Superman, and again, you go back to the Golden Age stories, Jonathan and Martha Kent weren't even really there. Like in some those the original origin was just that he's found by a passing motorist and they drop him off in an orphanage,
Mhm,
and that's
mhm,
it.
mhm. Yeah,
And even
that was
like
a
the
nice
radio, and like what was it, the radio serial? And again, I'm going just off what Anthony said in his podcast, but
Mhm.
he basically emerged like fully grown from the pod in
In the
one of those.
costume, yeah, he's ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think,
So
I think one of the Power Girl iterations was just like, yeah, Power Girl came out of that pod fully grown, ready to rock,
mhm.
just like educated by the spaceship, ready to go. Yeah. So
Right. So I think they did a really cool thing here where they had that differentiation and they showed that differentiation and they honored that original origin by saying like, okay, yeah, he was adopted by these people named the Kents, but they died early on. So yeah, he does have their name, but he wasn't raised by them. So he's got a very different view of humanity than the Superman we know. And I thought that was a brilliant way of both honoring that original origin, but also to help differentiate him from the Earth 1 Superman.
absolutely, like I would love the chance to revisit this Superman, like maybe a couple years down the
Mhm.
line on this Earth, and just see him be the two-fisted socialist crusader of the original
Absolutely.
Siegel and Schuster comics. Like he's breaking down doors, he's taking on corrupt politicians and political fat cats. I mean, it would almost be like the rockabilly Superman of the Rags Morales Grant Morrison run, where it's just like,
Mhm.
I just smell rats, man, rats with money, and just
Wait,
like he's just ready to kick some ass. Yeah.
wait 10 more years until that character's in the public domain. I am going to write that story.
Oh yeah.
I'm
I
going to
mean,
write the shit out of that story. Yeah.
you and me both,
All right.
brother. I got one in the chamber.
Okay. We are officially announcing now we are going to team up on this thing.
Oh yeah. Oh man, we are gonna do it to it. Like, I mean, we could do a whole multiverse of characters, like
Hell yeah.
just essentially using the original Golden Age Superman as a springboard. Like, there's so many ways you could go about it. I mean, if Alan Moore can get away with it in Supreme, I mean, come on now. Come
Oh
on
yeah.
now.
Absolutely.
Wait,
Yes.
anybody with a clever enough writer, you can find all manner of ways around loopholes, is all I'm saying. insert
All right.
insert image of me wringing my hands here.
All right. I think that's a good note to close up on. Are there any other things you wanted to
yeah.
mention about Just Society?
One more thing, and it's a stealth thing that I think I literally realized in media res as we were sitting here. Part of that, like Shakespeare, I was like, there's something about that rang a faint gong in my brain. And then it occurred to me that this was the writer, and whoever the writer is, I want to buy him a steak dinner because this is genius. Kent Shakespeare from the 5 Years Later arc of Legion of Superheroes. Like, it's a clue. It's a clue.
I've got no familiarity with Legion,
Okay.
so you have to.
So
tell me.
so 5 years later, like Superboy, like all that continuity has been dealt with. Like, there's a whole thing with Superboy. I could get into it with you, but we don't have time. I don't have enough like slide rules and graphs. But there is a character in the Legion books that resembles very strongly like the Golden Age, like, or not necessarily Golden Age, but like Superboy-ish. And he's called Kent Shakespeare, and he has some similar powers. Like, it's kind of like he might be a descendant of Clark and Lois. Like, he's got a little bit of super strength. He's not, but he's a supporting character in the book. He's like a trainee that one of the Legion 5 years later, when everything's kind of shitty, it's essentially their Dark Knight Returns. They come back and try to make right what once went wrong. So yeah, so he's a character in there. I was like, and then when they mention it in the tent, where it's like, this is our reporter Shakespeare, and my brain didn't catch it the first time. And then the second time I was watching, I'm like, son of a bitch. That was literally the writer going, can you guess? Can you guess? Anybody who's like paying attention and might want to earn their little, not necessarily a Marvel No prize, but I just feel that might have been, maybe it's a coincidence. Take it with a grain of salt.
No,
but
I
I
don't
kind
think
of
so
felt like that
because
was
again,
yeah.
this screenwriter, I don't know if it was the same one who did
Hmm.
this one, but he had done like some of the other Tomorrowverse stuff. He was, he
Mhm.
was on Digging for Kryptonite, and he was talking about, he's definitely a legit fan, so that's very possible. I think they've definitely gone to people who
Yeah,
know their stuff on
yeah,
this.
yeah. And one more thing where it's just like I'm not sure because Jay Garrick doesn't look discernibly older than Barry, but he calls
Mhm.
him son, and like back in my day, where it's just like, um, you don't look that much older than Barry, bro.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
I
just
thought that
like,
was I
uh,
I did I did clock that as well. I thought that was an interesting idea because it's like I can understand if you're
yeah,
dealing with like the
yeah.
older
Mm-hmm,
Jay Garrick,
mm-hmm.
but it did seem a little out of place. I guess maybe they just wanted to kind of acknowledge that relationship, maybe. But
Maybe they originally wanted to put the gray in his temples, and then they just were just like, nah, let's not
mhm,
overcomplicate this. They're both basically kind of the same age, but like maybe it's just a matter of experience. Like
yeah,
Jay debuted, I think, in 1941, so he's got about 2 or 3 years of experience as opposed to
mhm,
Barry, who seems very green, like he doesn't even realize he can vibrate through molecules.
right,
So, but yeah, I mean, apart from that, like these are the fun kind of nits that I like to pick. Where I'm just
mhm,
like, oh, let me just turn this over like a Rubik's cube and just have
right,
some fun with it. Where it's like, come up with my own little reasons for why things are the way they are. And
mhm,
at the end of the day, this is a fun movie. Get yourself a big bowl of popcorn and your beverage of choice, and just kick back and watch it because it's a lot of fun.
yeah,
Like, and you'll have a good
absolutely,
time. You get to see a lot of cool things, like the Flash throw a bunch of grenades in a crab monster's mouth and it explodes in a gout of blood. Like, you'll see some crazy stuff that you were not expecting, and people get got in
mhm.
this movie. Like, there's some real pathos and some real deaths here. Like,
Oh
we
yeah,
established that Hawkman reincarnates, and then yeah, he spoiler alert, he gets got. And then his
mhm.
last words are Shiera. And I was like, oh my God, you're not going to make me ugly cry over fucking Hawkman, are you? That was good, man. That's some good stuff. And the Steve Trevor bit, like, live tomorrow's not guaranteed. The nice
Mhm.
message at the end, tomorrow's not guaranteed. Live today and be present today. So I thought that was a really sweet message. And when Diana gives Barry the ring, like, I was like, oh, my heart, my feelings.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. Good
So
stuff.
yeah, I
Good
mean,
stuff all
very good stuff. Now, the last thing I wanted to say about this, and it just
around.
kind of like about the Tomorrowverse in general, and how they had decided to go with the how they've had like how many movies have we had in this series so far? We've had I'm bringing up the list here.
Long Halloween is 2 parts, so does that count
Right,
as
but
2 or
I'm counting it as one. So we've
yeah,
had,
that
Man
counts.
of Tomorrow, Just
Mhm.
Society World War II, Long Halloween, Green Lantern, Beware of My Power, Legion of Superheroes, Justice League War World. So we get, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 movies, and then we jump right into Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah,
And
again.
yeah, and
My
and I
God.
think this, from what I've seen of
Mhm.
the Tomorrowverse, I think it's definitely an improvement over the DCAU or whatever they're calling that, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
new animated, whatever they're calling that previous one where they
Yeah,
use
yeah,
like the
yeah,
new
that whole
52
previous
designs.
incarnation.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I
Ugh.
mean
It
there were
was
some good
fine.
movies, especially as it got
There
on.
was
Like
good stuff.
I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
Death of
Yeah,
Superman and Rise of Superman was very good.
that was a banger. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
actually a banger. I will concede the designs. And Jerry O'Connell makes for a really great Superman.
Yes. And I like Son of Batman too. I thought that was a fun movie too.
Yeah, yeah. Son of Batman is really good. I mean, it has one of my. I think it's that one that has one of my favorite lines. I guess they're nunjas, and I'm just like, oh my God, Dick, no, 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 Dick, don't do that.
but
It's
but
just
one
such
of the
great
things
dialogue.
but yeah, one of the things about this Tomorrow, because and I don't know about you, but I really kind of miss
Mhm.
when they would do these animated adaptations of these classic comic book stories, but they
Okay.
weren't in some sort of shared continuity, like like The Dark Knight Returns, which we talked about before,
Yeah, they can
or
stand alone.
right,
Red
yeah,
Sun.
and
Hmm.
Red Sun, another one,
Hmm.
the Superman Batman movies,
New
all
Frontier.
those,
Yeah.
they New Frontier as well, excellent example, and All Star Superman too, and all these different movies they've done where they had these that were completely set outside, and now they decide, I think we're just going to kind of do a shared continuity in animation, and then we're going to
Hmm.
work these stories into these universes, and I feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity because I mean we're already getting the shared universe stuff in live action. I mean, we had it in
Yeah.
2 different places in the movies and in the TV show. We got Crisis work through that too. So,
Hmm.
and I've not seen this new Crisis yet, or part 1 of it. I'm not saying I'm not going to see it, right? I'm not an idiot. I'm going to see it, obviously. But
Harry, I think we are obligated to see it at this point.
yeah,
I think we kind of activated a trap card, and I think we're like, oh well, I guess we're doing this now
guess
because
we're doing this.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of guns hung on the wall in this movie, and I'm like, well, I guess we gotta. So
Mhm.
we might need to jump to Crisis and then maybe make a point of like visiting maybe Beware My Power. If you haven't done it already, you might have done.
No,
it
I haven't done
already,
that one
but
yet. No, the only
I
ones
haven't
of
done
these
that one
I've
yet
done so
either, yeah.
far, the only ones of these I've done is just this and Long Halloween. So,
Long Halloween,
so yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
still plenty to cover. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like first off, I feel like it is too soon to do Crisis in this universe.
Hmm.
And then also I just feel like, I'd much rather see Crisis on Infinite Earths, like doing an adaptation of the actual Crisis series instead. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some clips of the Crisis movie, so I'm
Mhm.
not completely like, but I think they're trying in their way. Like they've reintroduced this, and I think that they've done kind of a fun thing with the animated movies in the Tomorrowverse where yes, there are through lines that connect the movies, but by and large, you could watch Man of Tomorrow or even this one and not
Mhm.
necessarily have to move forward. Like they're not
Right.
as intricately tied together as the previous DCAU New 52 kind of stuff where like
Mhm.
this leads into that. Like you can still kind of compartmentalize, and if you just want to cherry pick which movies you like the best, that's absolutely fine.
Right.
I think what's interesting about Crisis, and this may this may brush up against spoiler territory, so should I might need to put a little caveat in here. If you want to
So,
go in completely cold,
yeah, if
yeah,
anyone doesn't want to hear any
yeah,
spoilers
yeah.
because that movie came
All
out
right,
fairly recently, just
yeah,
skip ahead
yeah.
about
Good.
5 minutes or
Yeah,
so.
about 2 to 5 minutes, absolutely. So I'm just gonna spoil a little thing for you, and it's gonna be just not necessarily like I've only seen a couple clips, like I said,
Mhm.
but there is a sequence where Barry Allen, the Barry from this movie, he kicks off the events of Crisis, and at one point he meets this homeless British man who is
Ah.
very preternaturally connected to all these things. And it's John Constantine from the DCAU animated movies.
Oh. Matt Ryan?
He's filling Matt Ryan, yeah. So he's filling
Nice.
the Harbinger, or not necessarily the Pariah role.
Mhm.
Like the Spectre comes to him at the end of the DCAU, the previous version, and it's just like, hey man, you fucked up, and now the thing is, you get to live. You get to watch this whole shit show over and over and over again. How it all ends in fire,
Oh.
and you're going to live. And like he teams up with Barry, and essentially, I think sets Barry on the path to discovering how to. Because this is Crisis on Infinite Earths Part One, so they're going
Right.
to end
Yeah,
it on a
it's gonna be
cliffhanger. I don't know the whole
3
detail.
parts. Yeah.
It's going to be a three-parter, much like the other one. So I think that don't expect everything to be a one-to-one of
Right.
previous iterations of the story that we've seen. So
Mhm.
I'm willing to on one level, I would be, if I was coming in cold, I'd be like, oh man, this is
Mhm.
gonna suck. Like how many times we gotta reboot this goddamn universe? Like just
Right.
just pick a continuity and stick with it. That's all I
Right.
ask.
Or just
I
don't
don't
do a continuity at all.
just don't do a continuity at all. Like all these things are just, like comics just don't need to necessarily have to all interlock all at the same time. You can just be like,
Right.
yeah, I was busy over in a couple other things, and just be like, read the latest Superman issues. But
Mhm.
I think that this is going to be interesting. I think that these movies have been self-contained enough that you can take or leave it. And I think what they're going to do with Crisis might not be what we expect. Like it
Okay.
might not be the reboot that we might be thinking of.
So it might
Like
be like,
I'm
I don't
not
know if you're a
sure.
gamer at
Yeah.
all, but you
Mhm.
know, Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? Where you get into it
Kinda, yeah.
and it's a fun game and everything, and then
Mhm.
you're like, okay, yeah, but I'm just basically playing like
Seems this is familiar. Yeah.
the first chapter of the game, and they're gonna just remake the whole thing.
Mhm.
It's gonna be all the same beats with some improved graphics, some extra story beats here and there. But then you get to the end of that first part, and it's like, holy shit,
In
you just
comes
threw
the
a
sword.
massive curveball here.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that, and this could be genius if I am right, and get your tinfoil hats out, everybody. I could be wrong. Just take it with a grain of salt. but I think they might be playing on fan expectation. I think
Mm.
they might be playing around with the idea of like, because there's this one clip where like, you know, it's the satellite scene from Crisis on Infinite Earths where all the
Mhm.
heroes are meeting all the other heroes. And again, Barry, Perry, I swear to God, if you just tell me to shut up, I won't spoil anything. But there's this great moment. It's just because I'm just trying to whet your appetite. I'm trying to get you intrigued, Perry, so that
Go
we
for
can
it. Go
watch
for
this
it.
movie together. So there's a scene where, the Tomorrowverse Batman is hanging around on the satellite and he's like, and he hears a voice. And it's like, oh, Bruce, I can't believe it's you. He turns around. It's the adult Robin from
Oh.
Earth 2. And it's like, I'm Dick Grayson. You adopted me and you trained me as your ward, and together we helped a lot of people. And Batman just takes it for a beat and goes, that sounds incredibly irresponsible. Oh, it's amazing. I'm just like, and Jensen Ackles with just perfect, like, just almost Conroyan, like, levels
Mhm.
of dry. It's just like, I think that would be extremely irresponsible. And he's just like, it's an amazing line. And I won't spoil anything else. There's a lot of great cameos. There's a lot of like, from the clips I saw, there's a lot of like beautiful little bits of candy.
Mm.
And I think it would be fun to like to watch that and kind of like, I mean, if the demand is there, everybody, like we could, revisit Crisis on Infinite Earths as it stood as a comic,
Mhm.
and then watch this and just kind of be like, okay, well, here's these beats and here's that beat, and very interesting stuff. I think it'll be fun. I think they're playing our expectations against us, and I think that'll be neat to see when they pull the rug out from under people who are longtime fans, where it's like, I know where this is going, and
Right.
then you don't. So.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, that I'm very intrigued now. Like,
Mhm,
yeah, I'm
mhm.
much more intrigued than I was before because I was originally thinking like, oh, okay, we're just gonna get like another Crisis thing, and it's just gonna be, the Tomorrowverse's version of Crisis, where we got the CW's version
Mhm.
of Crisis. But this sounds like something that's different, that's a
Could
little bit
be
more
new,
unique,
like.
and so yeah, I'm intrigued,
Mhm.
especially because that this is establishing like a sort of continuity between these different universes because you know the New 52 version one that started after the Flashpoint Paradox, which came after Justice League
Mhm.
Doom. So there is that whole aspect of it too. So yeah,
Yeah.
this thing has been like continuing on for a good minute now.
Yeah, and I think calling back to your thing where it's just like you wanna open the door to tell all these self-contained kind of stories, I think this is it. I
Right.
think this is their way of being like, yeah, worlds lived, worlds died, but the worlds were reborn, and now we have, like, infinite possibilities to go wherever we want, and I think that's gonna be pretty, freaking cool. Like,
So now, last question, since we
mhm.
and this is and guys, I promise this will be the last thing, and then we'll close
Yeah,
up
we're heading
this
towards the
episode.
door, everybody. We're
Yeah.
heading towards the door. Don't worry about it. We're in the lobby of the theater right now. We're just doing
Now,
that thing where you talk and they're turning off the lights.
yes. Now I'm gonna
Yeah.
put on even more. I'm gonna wrap some even more tinfoil around my
Ooh,
head.
more tinfoil. Oh
So
hell yeah! We got a box of it in bulk over here, so don't even worry about it.
when they announced that they were going to be doing Crisis, they also announced
Mm.
they're going to be doing an animated adaptation of Watchmen. Do you think
Ooh.
we might be leading into a world where they do a Doomsday Clock movie?
Now, Perry, this is where you and I, very gently and with all the love in the world for you, must part ways because I do not particularly care for Doomsday Clock. Mary Marvel should not have to look at Dr. Manhattan's junk. Um, that's just not something that I wanted to see happen. Um,
Fair
but
enough.
I would be very surprised if that happened. I mean, might they try to do something with Watchmen? Maybe, but I don't know. That book is very charged
Hmm.
and like really I just think it's just kind of it's had its moment. And I mean, maybe they could do something with like the Minutemen stuff by Cook.
Hmm.
I mean, that I would watch the shit out of. But I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility. I would be gobsmacked if it happened. Like, you would knock me over with a feather.
I
But
would be surprised if they actually did it, but I think that
yeah,
there is. I mean, I think
there's a lot of moving parts.
the timing is
Yeah.
interesting. That's all I'm
It
saying. I'm saying
is.
the timing is
It
interesting.
is interesting. As we get closer and closer to like Superman coming out into copyright, and also the like
Hmm.
the 100th anniversary of Superman. I'm not saying no, but I would be extremely surprised. I mean, I think they would do some like there's so many other stories that you can tell. You could go off in all manner of directions.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what you would do next. Like you essentially, for lack of a better term, you create hyper time and then you just go nuts. Like there's so many directions you could go. I mean, I don't know, man. Like if it were me and I was like, let's do a bunch of done in ones. I mean, let's just go off the deep end. Like, let's do Superman speeding bullets. Let's
Oh, I would
do
love to see Superman speeding bullets.
Yeah, except without the cop out ending. Like
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry. Like with all the love and respect for the creative team of Superman speeding bullets, that last page is a cop out, and you know it. You know it. You know it. No,
I also
no,
don't like
if-
the whole idea of Lex Luthor becoming the Joker. I think
The
now you're
Joker,
taking
it
it.
doesn't
You're
make sense.
stretching. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're stretching it. You're
Yeah,
stretching
yeah,
it
yeah.
now.
Like no, like the Joker is the Joker, but in this iteration, like the Joker would team up with Lex Luthor. I could see that. Happen.
Yeah.
Kind of like the original plan for that Cursed movie that you talked about, where like they were ostensibly supposed to have both characters, but then the writers just merged them into one, and Jesse Eisenberg had to play both of them, like almost as if he had dissociative identity disorder. And it's like,
Right.
I will always, Perry, guys, we're getting up. We're at the door. We're at the door. I swear to God, but I don't get a lot of chances to talk with my man over here. So just give me a second. I will always be mad over like Superman, like his mom being threatened, and like Luthor holding a cell phone. Like my internal headcanon is like, hey Lex, do you know what radio waves, cellular waves look like? Because I do. And then just boom, he's gone. And he rescues his mom in like 3 seconds, brings her back and is like, Ma, you just wait here for a minute. I'm just gonna take the nice man to jail. And just like it just never doesn't make sense to me. Oh Lord. But we could do a whole, like, if we ever want to do an Irish wake for the Zack Snyderverse, now that it's
Well, we're actually doing. I'm actually going to be doing a DCEU ranking episode very soon. So I've already got someone booked on that. So
oh man, like if you need a pinch hitter, if that person's not available.
Well, one of the reasons I chose this guy specifically is because he's got very different views on the Snyder stuff from me. So
Okay,
it'll
all
make for a
right,
very
all right.
interesting conversation.
Free market of ideas. Yeah, cool,
Absolutely,
cool,
yeah.
cool,
So,
cool.
because I figure if it was someone who has the same views as me, it's just like, okay, our rankings are basically the same. That's not as interesting.
And really, it's just dragging something that people like for filth. I mean, look, there's fans of those movies out there. My brother's one of them, and I'm never gonna yuck his yum. Like, if you have fun with those movies, have fun with those movies, man. Absolutely, it's the
And like
best
now that we've
Rorschach
gotten
versus Dr. Manhattan movie ever of all time.
yeah,
But
and now that we've gotten while we're getting the DCU stuff, I can disassociate myself from it, and I did that when I prepared for the ranking. So I think based on what people have heard me say about these movies in the past, I think they'll be surprised by my choices in these
exactly,
rankings.
yeah. In the cold light of day, when you come back to it, I mean, there's stuff in those movies that I actually do quite like. I mean, Russell Crowe as Jor-El is amazing. Like, I like the idea of him as Jor-El. He's a badass action hero, but they always do Lara dirty. Like, she's a test pilot, dude. She's a test pilot. She's a badass. That one issue of like Grant Morrison, like Superman, where like the House of L is being stormed by Zod and his cronies, and Lara grabs like a fucking Kryptonian shotgun and is ready to wreck shit. Like, yes, she's not just gonna swoon and sigh and die. Like, fuck. Like, it makes me so mad. Anyway,
I mean, I can't fault Snyder for that though, because everybody does that to Lara.
Everybody does that. Lara always gets done dirty. Like hashtag Lara done dirty. But but it would be interesting to revisit them now. Ryan has always suggested that I watch the director's cut of Batman v Superman, and I've always
I will say, even like, because I tried watching these again, and I will say that. And I said this back when we did the episode on Batman v Superman, because Derek and I, we watched the director's cut when we did that episode. Okay. Yeah. And it is, even if you disassociate it from the characters themselves, even even the fact that it is a more coherent movie than the theatrical cut, there's still plot holes that you could drive a dump truck through.
I mean, to be fair, yes. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like you have the one person who's vulnerable to kryptonite use the weapon to kill the monster that is vulnerable to
Yeah,
kryptonite.
yeah.
And look, guys,
And that's not
guys,
even the biggest plot
yeah,
hole in the
like
movie. That's not even
it's
the
not
most.
even the biggest. Look, these people want to go home, Perry. They want to go home.
Yeah.
So we got to bring this in for a landing because
All
we
right,
will be
all
here
right.
all night.
Yeah. All right.
So we will wish the good people adieu. And
Okay.
and yeah,
Well, before we wish them good night, why don't you tell them where they can find you?
Oh, absolutely. You can find me all over the place. I am on Blue Sky now as Stacy HD. That's my new haven for social media. I still dip into the bad website every once in a while, the dark site, to post links to the Fanboy Power Hour and just kind of check up on things. But my flag has transferred to Blue Sky, and I'm having a much better time over there. You can always reach me. My joke is that everybody's welcome. The vibe is chill. There's Fresca in the fridge. Don't worry about it. And you can also find me, through the Fanboy Power Hour podcast, obviously. And just watch this space. I'll be posting some. Hopefully, I'm trying to put some feelers out to get some fiction published. So we'll see how that goes. I've got a superhero concept that I'm working on my own. So we will see how that develops. So watch this space.
Very cool. Okay. All right. So that does it for us as well. And you'll find links to Stacey stuff in the show notes as always. And as for us, we are superherocinephiles.com and Super Cinema Pod on social media, which these days the Twitter page is still there, but I've locked it down, and so it's not being used anymore. You go there, you'll just see the picture, and you'll see a big old lock on it. So it's not being
a relic of a former era.
Exactly. Yeah. We're keeping the page. We're hanging on to the page just to avoid anyone squatting on it or anything like that. So
exactly. It's the Robin costume in the glass. It's there to be observed.
Exactly. Yeah. Until they resurrect Jason Todd.
Definitely.
All right. But anyway, so we are Super Cinema Pod on Threads and Blue Sky and Instagram, and that does it for us. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine, with the support of Zencaster. The show is created by myself and the late great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. You can also support us by visiting crowdfunder.com/paragonscomic. That's crowdfunder with no e.com/paragonscomic, and help support my superhero comic book, Paragons of Earth. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.